Story points? More like story pointless, am I right? No one? I'm Ray Myers. Welcome to Craft vs. Cruft. And for the third time ever, we have a guest. Nicole, will you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Nicole Safely. I am a longtime friend of Ray's and an Agile coach in this space. I cannot wait for this discussion. Once again, about story points.
Right, so quick intro. Today, we're going to expand on something which was a passing thought I had that I posted and ended up being my most successful LinkedIn post ever a couple weeks ago, which is simply said one sentence. If we talked about theory of constraints even 1/10 as much as we talk about story points, the world would be a better place. Kind of a New Year's resolution. And I just threw that out there, ended up getting a ton of engagement, eventually tweeted out by Goldratt Books as well, which is actually the official publisher of the Theory of Constraints books. So I see you. Thank you. They've got a new one actually called Goldratt's Rules of Flow. Good reviews. I'm reading it right now. Check it out. Also had author of the book of TameFlow and a bunch of other great people comment on that thread. So Steve Tenen, TameFlow Circle, I see you as well. But that aside, let me explain what I was driving at, and then I will turn you loose on this, Nicole. So what is wrong with story points? Nothing and everything. If you need a way to communicate about the level of efforts of your microtasks, it's a perfectly viable way to do it. It's not the best, but that's for another day. The issue is that people tend to overfixate on that topic, which is not actually the point's fault. So it's not just that story points communicate poorly, which they do. It's that they communicate about something which shouldn't be very interesting to us in the first place. It's local optimization. It's a distraction. Customers are not buying story points. So my framing of theory of constraints versus story points was just meant as a symbol for systems thinking and cause and effect logic versus obsession over meaningless trivia. So go off, Nicole.
Do you think that it's a local optimization because it's the thing that is in the developer's purview, right? So when we think about theory of constraints, and I don't want to go too far there just yet, but when we think about theory of constraints, it implies that we have the power to look at the system as a whole. And when we think about organizations, those people, in the teams, unless the culture exists for you to believe that you could even have an impact on the whole, I'm going to focus on what I can change. And so I think that's part of the reason why we get so fixated, because we haven't yet had the ownership at a system level to even believe that we could change the system. I believe in most organizations, as an individual, all I can change is the thing that's right here in front of me. Does that resonate?
Absolutely, but that's kind of the whole point of systems thinking, because organizations are inherently splintered. It's not just the developers, right? Everyone's view is somewhat limited. And, we may feel like, we're never going to have the bird's eye, and even the people who are supposed to have the bird's eye don't really. But what we can do is start to pull the thread. We can get returns on this very quickly. I'll give you an example, right? And actually, I can tie it to story points because I was in a users group recently, and someone asked about estimation strategies and just showing how contentious this topic has become to developers. We ended up talking about just that one question for the entire meeting, the entire hour. And my first question to this fellow was, the person who's asking you for these, because they've got some magic formula that they really like if they had 100% perfect numbers, if you could give them the best numbers that were right all the time, what would they do differently? How would that affect anything? And the person who was asking us the question actually didn't know. They were going through all this effort to try and give better answers when they didn't even know what would be done with them, why this information was being asked for. So that's where I would start, is just when you're asked for something, try to understand why.
So I think with that, Ray, one thing that it seems simple. Why wouldn't you just ask somebody? But then you get into the organizational dynamics of what does it look like for you to question your boss that says, I need to know how many story points you're going to deliver this sprint. For me to ask you, if you're my boss, like that takes courage. And it is a challenge potentially, because what if you, Ray, don't know the answer to that? Now I have made you look bad potentially if you're in that kind of relationship. So then you go, like, these things, it's like it is a tangled cord. Like there's a reason that people are even afraid, or maybe fear is too strong of a word, but I mean, like at the end of the day, am I willing to challenge somebody to go deeper? And when I look out in the world today too, when I think of Agile and all the things around it, I'm not sure that we look back at those values that we started with, of courage and open and honest communication. So I don't mean to take you down a different path, but it presumes that you have the ability to actually ask those questions in an organization and have it be respected and honored.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I mean, our surroundings can be really limiting on this. Some of them are going to welcome inquiry more than others. But I think building a better mutual understanding with the people that you're working with, no matter how little or how much you're able to move the needle on that, it's worth it. It's worth trying to do that. When you first worked with me, we were in an environment that was pretty forgiving of inquiry. And, I started out, I would ask questions probably in a pretty brash and blunt way. I later learned to be more diplomatic most of the time. But you may have to build some social capital with people, some credibility with certain people in order to have those more insightful conversations. I just think that's a skill that's worth developing.
Well, this is how I moved into leadership, was asking hard questions. Asking those hard questions, then I spent 14 years being coached on how to be nicer and not ask such hard questions that I made everybody mad. Like, hello. But so there is a balance, and you have to figure out, how do I question and do that without burning bridges, without, and like you said, the people that I'm making happy, how do I keep them happy, but also challenge them to grow alongside me? It's not like I'm the only one that needs to, or, that everybody else needs to grow. But you have to figure out, how do you navigate that? Some of it comes with wisdom. You said, like, now I'd be more diplomatic. I would almost say, Ray, why would you be diplomatic? Like, that's your superpower. But if you have created relationships, continue to challenge, because when we stand by and we get kind of dumbed down and don't reach out, that's when progress stops. So there's a fine line. Yeah.
Well, you said a minute ago that you would ask some questions that kind of got you into trouble, and people were always trying to rein you in. So I'm actually curious, what kind of questions were those?
There's a ton of them. And even just asking the question why sometimes goes too far. And what I've learned is that you've got to give people space, and like you said, create the relationship, but you have to give them space to know that it's okay for you not to have an answer why. I look at this in politics too. I think we ask politicians questions that they have no business answering, or we ask them to do things they have no business doing. It's the same thing in corporate America. Like, if you're going to ask the question why, you have to make it okay for them to say, I don't know. And so that means, not going around saying, oh, well, my boss said he doesn't know. He doesn't have any. Like, it's a symbiotic relationship. So you create the relationship first so you can ask those hard questions. But naturally, we don't like to be questioned. And so, what I've changed now is to try and help people understand, when I ask a question, I'm not questioning you. I'm just asking a question. And the intention is that we're growing from it. The answer could be very well, you're wrong. Nicole, you don't know what you're talking about. And I have to be willing to listen to that side too, so that we can move in a direction. But I think why anything asks people to kind of defend themselves. So, another tactic is to ask more powerful questions. What does success look like? How could we, how might we? And so then you open up dialogue that is beyond just an explanation. Tell me why. Well, if I knew why, we probably wouldn't be sitting in this situation. So how about we have a different conversation? And so, over the years, growing in that, being able to converse with people in a different way, to take down their defenses, to go beside them, understand their goals, and then, ask questions from that perspective. That's proved to be a little bit more effective. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and the kind of craft to that really fascinates me. And you've had a lot of chance to develop that because in your career you've worked at lots of different levels of abstraction in the organizations, right? Like when we first worked together in like '07, you were working with a team or two, and eventually you went on to become an enterprise agile coach overseeing transformations.
Yeah, I've worked at all different levels. I mean, today I work at kind of the portfolio level, but I still have influence with leaders. I love working at the team level because, at the end of the day, the team's the one that's getting the work done. We need leadership to be in a space that they're able to provide the guardrails. Now I like to coach leaders. It's not even about Agile. We don't talk much about story points when we sit down with the CEO. They really don't care. They have a different question that they need to have answered, which is, how are we going to deliver the business value that our customers need as quickly as possible? High quality, so the conversations and the questions are a little bit different at the varying levels of the organization.
Absolutely. The CEO doesn't care about story points, quoting you on that. You heard it here. But when we talk about systems thinking, though, it's not just the components that might be at fault, but how they interact. So when you mention being on this level or that level, I wonder who is in a position to help when the problem transcends levels. It's the interaction.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge thing. Number one, it's flattening those levels. You even refer to it as down. Like, why is it that we naturally assume that our teams are down from someplace? And so one of the things that we try to do, and it was somewhat successful, and, there's always room for improvement, but was really to flatten the organization. When we all understand what our overarching goals are, right? As a team member, can I put myself in the purview of the CEO? Like, what is he concerned about? Where are we going? What's the vision of what we're trying to do? And we have the ownership at that level so that we're all in that. And conversely, like, a CEO sitting in an ivory tower is not going to create a high-performing organization. When that CEO comes and sits at the table with the people doing the work, things change. Empathy is built on both sides, right? We start to narrow or shrink kind of those levels in that then we're all just doing different jobs in the organization. And if we can align to that North Star, we've got a visionary leader that's sharing where we're going and respects that the people doing the work actually know what to do to make that dream a reality, then you get a lot of synergy through the organization. So I think it's understanding, what's the big picture and realizing that, me being a software developer or even an Agile coach, like, what I do is not as important as what we do, what we deliver, where we're going, what our impact is. And so just switching that, when we were working together, we started off as engineers and software developers. And I feel like we embraced and moved to product developers, right? Do I understand where the organization is going? Again, still there was room for improvement, but I think that notion that we're all in this together, we're rowing in the same direction. I think that's what's needed so that you can get that synergy. And then we talk about the frozen middle. So people on our development teams that are maybe not in leadership positions, we always assume that the person who is in that leadership, our leader or their leader's leader, like, that they know everything about what's going on. And the reality is we all it's cliche, but we put our pants on the same way. Like, the concerns in the C-suite are no different than the concerns that we have, right? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to make the right decision? Am I caring for my people? And so, but we assume that they just have it all together. They're all put together and everything is great. And reality is we're all just kind of figuring it out. And so having that empathy and understanding for one another and then partnering for that greater vision is so key. That's kind of philosophical, but that's one of the things I've noticed is like if you take time to talk to a leader and they're able to be vulnerable and share, like you kind of understand that we're all thinking and feeling and doing the same type of things day to day.
That's beautiful, and always feel free to get philosophical here. But I know you've got to run, so let's bring you back soon. We'll keep trying to fix the world, and people can find your links in the description. Thanks a lot for coming on.
You too, Ray. I'll talk to you later.
And as Lao Tzu said in the Tao Te Ching, with patience, the most tangled cord may be undone.